Anyway, after the bris, on Shabbos, was very interesting, is that even though the Krasny Rav was a very Hasidic rabbi, Hasidic Rav, in those days, they were different. Now, Hasidic, they don't want to, the women are like all, who knows where, separated. But in those days, the Hasidic Rabbanim, the tzaddik of the baby, told the people that drove him from Williamsburg to Borough Park, he said, listen, we have to go say Mazel Tov to the mother, because Anya was not at the bris, because she was not well, number one, and it wasn't such a custom, the recuperating process after a baby in those days wasn't so easy like it is today. And so he came to the.
I'm thinking about that he's holding the baby because he can.
Because she finally had.
That's like his father.
Yeah. So the next day, losing his mother, losing his family, and all that. And Esther is named after my mother's father. My mother's mother, Esther Franco. That's who Aunt Esther is named after. So he came to the house to say Mazel Tov to my mother. It wasn't easy for him. He had Parkinson's disease, and he was shaking. But I don't know how he held me by the bris. Maybe he was better in those days in 1953. But later on, when I got to know him, and when I understood him, and when I was like 8, 9, 10 years old, he moved to Borough Park in 1961, 62, and he had Parkinson's at the time. But anyway, so he came to say Mazel Tov to my mother, and he asked my mother to come to the door. He didn't want to come into the house because in those days they made a proclamation that you're not allowed to have a television, and he knew that we had a TV. But he came to the door to say Mazel Tov. He came to the door and he said Mazel Tov, stopped the car, and he gave my mother a blessing that she should heal well. And because I was born, my mother couldn't take care of Esther. Sharon Zverd's, Heshi Spitz's mother, Auntie Muriel, who later on moved to Netanya, but was living in Borough Park at the time, and I'll tell you more stories about the family going there, to Uncle Abi. This is Uncle Abi's wife who sponsored Anu and Zaidi to come to the United States. She took care of Esther for about 6 weeks. And she had 2 big boys at the time. Heshi and Moshe Spitzer were like, 5, 6 years older than Esther. So, and Moshe Spitzer was probably 10 years older than Esther. So she said she had a 13-year-old and a 6-year-old, and she was taking care of a 3.5-year-old girl. So for 6 weeks. And so my mother got better. And that was the beginning of my childhood at 1236 42nd Street.
So how was life in America?
So it wasn't easy for my mother to have children. She had something called thrombosis. So my father's first job in the United States of America, and he worked as a chicken flicker. They didn't do this by machine. He worked in a chicken market, and he used to flick the feathers, and he made like $42 a week in 1949. That's the salary that he made. It was on the low side, to say the least, as a chicken flicker. But it was enough to pay the rent. He paid the rent. The apartment in 1236 42nd Street was a very interesting. You walked in, and if you went straight, you went into the kitchen. To the right was a bathroom, the only bathroom in the apartment. You went straight, there was a kitchen, and then there was a little dinette at the end of that apartment. It was like a railroad apartment. On the other side, there was like a living room that faced the window. Then there was a middle room that was really my parents' bedroom with glass doors here and glass doors there. And then our bedroom was all the way in the back.
Mm-hmm. What about windows?
Huh?
Windows?
There was windows in the back. Yeah, there was Esther and I were in the back. But it was like what's called a railroad apartment. It was like everything went one way, and there was like a hallway in the middle. Our landlord was Mr. Landman, and I guess he wasn't nice to my parents because my parents didn't have, I don't have fond memories of him and his wife. But there was no lady who lived all the way upstairs in the third floor of 1236 42nd Street. We used to invite her down on the third floor in the attic apartment. We used to invite her down for Kiddush on Friday night or Havdalah on Saturday night. We lived between 12th and 13th and 42nd. So Friday nights he would daven in a very close shul between 13th Avenue. 13th Avenue was the main thoroughfare in Borough Park. When we lived in Borough Park was mainly, but before I get there, I'll just tell you, was sort of like, it was only like 50% Jewish and 25% Irish and 25% Italian. And even among the Jews, not everybody really was observant Jews in Borough Park. When we moved there, when my parents moved there in 1949, in the early 50s, that's what Borough Park is. Borough Park didn't really become a very, very Jewish neighborhood until the late 60s, early 70s. I want to back up for a minute. I know that I just told you that they got married in February of 1944, in February of 45. But I just have to tell you one little, very, very important part of the story of my mother not going to Israel and missing the boat and making a sign not to go. It turns out that the boat that she was supposed to be on was sunk, and they say it was sunk by the British, thinking it was an enemy freighter, it was common in those days. There's a few stories about this, and 1,200 Jewish boys and girls were killed on that boat. It was torpedoed by the British because it was like an Eastern European freighter. They thought it was the enemy, and she was supposed to be on that boat, and that was one of the most significant things that happened to her and how she was saved. Had the air raid not happened, and had she not been, all her clothes been stolen, and had she gone to the port city and gotten on that boat, she would not be alive today, and we would not. We would all not be alive today, and that's one of the most important parts of the story. About the part of my mother not being able to go to Israel from Bucharest.